Well, hello everyone. It's wonderful to be able to speak to you again today. As Derek just read, today's presentation is Debates, Day 25, The Need to Be Right, which coincidentally was the title of Bill's presentation last week, The Need to Be Right. So, I guess the best way to start the presentation on debates is to start with Chapter 81 of the Tao of Joy. Those who are good do not debate. Those who debate are not good. I'm sure most of us, if not all of us, are familiar with the quote. It's one of the more memorable quotes, one of the more well-known quotes. And you know what? It's so simple, it's pretty easy to understand the quote. The tricky part is actually in living it. And the reason why it's hard to live it is why I chose the subtitle, The Need to Be Right. Because often the need to be right is what stands in our way of living these, frankly, rather simple words. It's not good to debate. So, why aren't debates good? Well, let's see if we can unpack it a little. I mean, ultimately, as Derek points out so well, probably with close to these exact words, although I paraphrase a little bit, debates are just exercises of futility that are completely devoid of any benefits. Completely devoid of any benefits. Now, I mean that sincerely, because it's really tempting to go, well, wait a minute, you know, if a debate's done right, isn't it really a discussion and a search for the truth and so forth? It's like, you'll often hear that. But really, that's just cover. Ultimately, when you really break it down, the way Derek breaks it down in this chapter of the Tao of Joy Every Day, you realize, no, actually, debates are devoid of any benefits. And that's why Lao Tzu said, hey, they're not good, period. And Derek goes on to point out in this chapter, in a debate, you can win, lose, or draw, right? You can win, you can lose, or there can be a tie. And the reality of it is none of those three outcomes, or possible results, however you want to phrase it, yield any good. They just don't. If you win the debate, you'll likely gain a bitter enemy who will foster ill will toward you. I mean, that's the reality. If you lose the debate, you will feel the results of defeat, which will cause you to harbor bad will toward the victor. As soon as you start down a debate, you're locked into one of these three outcomes. And so far, you know, we've been through 2/3 of them, and it's just not going to yield any good. And then, of course, if you tie, the reality is you've done nothing to further your points. You've just wasted your time. Because really what happens in a tie, or even in a victory, really, this is the same. Instead of convincing anyone of anything, you really just lock people more firmly into their original positions. You don't really achieve anything. All you really achieve is stroking your ego. And I can tell you, from having fallen in this trap and almost ruined a personal relationship of mine, which I've talked about before, it's not worth it. Thanks to Bill and Derek teaching me this, I was able to repair that relationship. And I've talked about that before, and I'm not going to bring it up again. But it's just an example of why debates aren't good, because they really are all about the ego. And honestly, that's all they're about. So why? Why do we engage in debates? Why do we do it? Well, our egos will tell us. It's a search for the truth, not only for us, but for the opposition as well. We're just looking for the truth, right? Just trying to expound on the truth. What's so wrong with that? Well, maybe there's nothing wrong with expounding on the truth. But there is a right and a wrong way to do it. And debates, I can tell you, are the wrong way. They're just not good. So our egos will say we must be proven right to avoid looking bad. We must win at all costs. And let's face it, this is why you get the tactics that are employed in debates. Derek's talked about this subject many times, all the tactics that are used. The straw man, right? Attack the weakest form of the other person's argument, and all of the other things, all the other tricks, drowning out the person's other side and just machine gunning them with point after point after point that you think furthers your point down the road, down the field further. It doesn't. Our egos will tap into our needs to be right and our needs to make sure everyone knows we are right. That's why the ego is so slippery. It taps into the worst of us in a way. But a key to getting past it is awareness. There's that word again. It always keeps coming up. Being aware of what's going on inside you, outside you, everywhere is really a real key to understanding and to making progress. In short, we do it for self-glorification and to show people how smart we are. That's pretty much why we have debates. It's pretty much why if you spend any time on an online forum, you'll find someone just fishing for a debate. And if you want to do that, boy, you can have that in spades on the internet. Bill and Derek just talked about what a great tool the internet is, for learning what was the meaning behind the lyrics in great rock songs from the past that we didn't have access to before. Yeah, the internet's a great tool. But like all tools, it's neutral. And if you want to engage in debates, boy, that's a great form to do it in. But it's not good. It's right there in chapter 81. It's just not good. So how do we go about avoiding debates? How can we avoid it? We know it's not good. We know kind of what makes us do it if we're honest with ourselves. So how do we avoid it? How can we not fall into the trap? Well, a key component of it is we have to recognize when our egos are driving our motives. I often find that just saying the word ego when I recognize it is helpful. It redirects my mind to what that little ego thing is doing. And sometimes just pointing it out for what it is can make it go away. So for me, I use a trigger word that lets, my ego know that I know what it's up to. And usually I'll just say the word, ego, silently in my head, ego. And it crystallizes and I understand, usually. And this will often make it recede because the ego prefers to be covert. It doesn't like you to know what it's doing. But you can let it know that you know, sometimes just by using a little trigger word, something that fires a synapse in your brain that causes you to reshift, reframe, look at it differently. So drawing your focus and attention to what your ego is doing can be extremely helpful. And it can maybe help you stay above the fray and not get into a debate. It at least gives you a fighting chance to be aware of what that ego is doing. And we all have it, but it doesn't have to always win. But again, like always, awareness is kind of the first step. So realize that the best way to convince anyone of anything is with silent actions, not loud words. In reality, soft words to someone who's willing to listen goes a lot further than screaming at the top of your lungs at someone who doesn't agree with you anyway. There's an old saying, it goes something along the lines of, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. Well, that's often because the teacher knows when to appear. So it's important to wait for the right time to share any truth you have. In a debate, or someone egging you on to a debate, that's not the right time. So in short, let go of the need to be right. Replace it with the willingness to act right and to be a good example of your convictions. Why did Bill have such a wonderful occurrence? Because he acts the way good fathers act. He acts the way good people act. Doesn't mean he never talks about it. Hey, thank goodness he does talk about it. He talks about it at the right time. And him talking about it has helped me so much. But the reason why he could talk about it so well and why he's so good at it is because he lives it. And I can say the same for my friend Derek. So before I get into the summary, I want to share a personal story, not the one about my sister being a fundamentalist Christian and me being an atheist. I've told that one before. This is a more recent story. Wendy and I recently bought a house. And in buying a house, we used a realtor that we had known for a couple of years. Really good guy. Liked him very much. He was a great realtor, always very attentive, very helpful. Just a good person, very easygoing, very approachable. Just watching him interact with other realtors, and he's just a good guy who lives the Tao. And of course, in looking for houses, and we spent a lot of time driving around in a car, me and Wendy and him and his assistant. Drove around, we looked at lots of properties, and in between driving, going from house to house, we talk. And he's a Seventh-day Adventist, which is coincidentally the religion that Wendy was raised in. And so he would talk about it, and the question came up. How were you raised? Of course, I was raised Catholic. And of course, now I'm not Catholic. I mean, for all intents and purposes, really, I'm an atheist. I don't hide the fact, but I'm not looking to debate about it anymore because I've been down that road with my sister to rather poor results. Thankfully, I was able to repair the relationship. So the reason why I bring up the story about my realtor is this. I don't know, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, he called me at work and he said, "Hey, I have something for you. Can I bring it by your office?" I said, "Sure." I was thinking he had a piece of mail for me from the condo or that we sold or something like that. And, he came by and he handed me a little envelope and it said, "From your Seventh-day Adventist friend." I thanked him and I said, we exchanged pleasantries and he left and I opened up the package and it was a DVD. And the DVD was called The Case for Christ. Now, I was familiar with the book, The Case for Christ, because it's one of the things my sister gave me to read, and I read it. But this movie really wasn't about that. It was more about the author's story before he was motivated to sit down and write his book. And so I watched it, and Wendy and I watched it. Wendy and I are both atheists. The difference is I became one later in life, and Wendy just sort of was always one. But ultimately, right now, we're both atheists. I like to think of myself as a spiritual atheist, but I don't know. Does that even make sense to say that? Well, to me it does. But I watched the movie, and the first thing I thought was, wow, that's really sweet. He's concerned about my soul. Which is true, by the way. Now, it could be very tempting to engage in a debate and rail against Christianity as an atheist. But what would that really do? Destroy a good relationship with someone I like? And for what? So I can prove my point of view? So my ego can get stroked? So I can show how smart I am? Then, of course, listening to Bill and Derek the last couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, and how they both sort of hint at oneness. And more when I think about oneness, I can see the truth in Christianity. I can see the truth in other religions. And it's okay that we all relate to it in different ways. It's silly to debate that or any other subject. But that one's usually a particularly hot button one, right? Just type in atheist versus theist on a Google search and watch what you get. It's better to not debate, even when you're tempted to. It's better to rise above the fray. All right, I'm going to start to sum it up now. So very simply, debates are bad. Not debating is good. Debates benefit neither you nor the opposition. Be aware it is our ego's need to be right that will suck you into a debate. Give up that need to be right. Give up the need to display rightness with words. Use silent action to demonstrate the truths of life that you know. Might be something as wonderful as going to a concert with your son. It is by living a good life that we convince others of what is good. In short, talk is cheap and convinces no one of anything. Last point, actions speak louder than words. Okay, as always, I'd like to end with the book recommendation, The Tao of Joy Every Day, a great book to use daily to help one study and learn the Tao teachings and put them into action. Thank you all so much for allowing me to speak with you today. I hope I said something that was helpful, and I hope you all have a wonderful Sunday.